A Tell Like Jericho by Arnold J. Toynbee between Oxus and Jumna. Audio version of the essay followed by detailed analysis of the essay. Introduction. The Philosopher as Traveller. Arnold J. Toynbee, 1889 to 1975, was one of the 20th century's most ambitious historians and philosophers of history. His monumental work, A Study of History, 1934 to 1961, attempted nothing less than a comprehensive comparative analysis of the rise and fall of civilizations throughout human history. Michael Sugrew's YouTube channel features beautifully presented lectures on the philosophies of history of Arnold J. Toynbee, G.W.F. Hegel, and Oswald Spengler. In A Tell Like Jericho, we encounter Toynbee not in his study surrounded by books, but as a physical traveller in the landscape of Gandhara, modern-day Pakistan. This essay, once included in the anthology East and West for BA students at Peshawar and Gomal universities, reveals Toynbee's distinctive method of historical reflection, the integration of geographical observation, archaeological insight, and philosophical meditation into a seamless whole. I have not yet seen a town like Alice. Perhaps the Alice is unique, but today I have seen a tell like Jericho. I am standing on the summit of the greater of the two great mounds at Charsadda, the ancient capital of Gandhara in the days before the Kushan emperors transferred the seat of government to Peshawar. The Charsadda Mound is like a giant footstool planted squarely in the centre of a gigantic fives court. This fives court's three walls are three mountain ranges, and its open end is demarcated by the broad river Indus. The court itself must measure more than 40 by 50, I am reckoning, not in feet, but in miles. From this commanding central point, one wins a panoramic view of the green plain extending in every direction. That line of poplars and that row of bluffs, they mark the course of one of the channels into which the Kabul River divides as it meanders diagonally across the plain to join the Indus. There must be half a dozen of these channels between the point where the Kabul and the Swat rivers unite and the further point where they reunite under the lee of the Katuk Mountains. These channels are like North European streams, Cherwell, Avon, Ouse, or Elbe. They flow at a bullock cart's placid pace between green banks overhung by trees. Only, in this land of intermittent rains, they are bled to feed innumerable canals and runnels that irrigate the fertile fields. The fields bear crops of wheat, rice, and sugarcane, and in the orchards, apricots alternate with oranges, plums, and pears. If you can imagine a blend between Lombardy and the Ghutta of Damascus, you will be able to conjure up Gandhara in your mind's eye. But Gandhara has one feature that is all its own: the rivers that break their way painfully through the mountain ranges and then spread themselves joyously over the plain. I had seen the Kabul River burst out at Warsak and the Indus below Amb. Today I have seen the Swat River performing the same feat at Abazai. The rock walls that have constricted its waters for miles on end here suddenly relax their grip, and the liberated torrent surges forward with the impetus of a shell shooting from the cannon's mouth. On the very threshold of the plain, a heavy toll of water is taken from the river to supply a grand canal. Yet, below the takeoff, there is no noticeable diminution in the river's volume. Nourished by the snows of distant Chitral, the Swat River here must have at least as great a volume as the Thames at Reading. Yet this is merely one tributary of a tributary. No wonder the plain is well watered, and no wonder that one new irrigation system after another is being engineered in order to make the hitherto unused waters fructify. This plain, with its agricultural wealth, has been a key point on the overland route between the subcontinent and the rest of the Old World. For how many thousand years has Gandhara played this part? You can measure the time by the height of this mound at Charsadda, on which I am standing. The mound has been built up out of layers of the debris of sun-dried brick buildings. It has mounted a few feet more, each time that dust has returned to dust, till it has risen at least as high as the Mound of Jericho. Its stature represents a continuous history of human occupation, extending over a span of perhaps 3,000 years. But at Jericho, the same stature must represent twice or three times that length of time. For at Jericho, the fields that nurtured the city were irrigated by a single spring, while the city of Charsadda was fed by this maze of rivers fertilizing the great green plain. Some 1,500 years have passed since the mound at Charsadda ceased to grow. Probably it never recovered from being sacked by the Huns in the 5th or 6th century of the Christian era. But the later deposits of civilization that are missing at Charsadda are present in the fort of Shabkadar, which I visited this morning. Here the upper story is Victorian British, the lower story is early 19th century Sikh, and the hill on which the Sikh invaders planted their stronghold might contain layers coeval with the latest at Charsadda. Today, the fort at Shabkadar is garrisoned by the Pakistan Army's frontier force. Sikhs and British in their turn have come and gone, and the monuments of their fleeting occupation testify to the transitoriness of human efforts and achievements. Yet some human achievements do endure. Travel on eastwards from Charsadda to Takht-i-Bhai, and you will find a monument that has quietly conquered time. Takht-i-Bhai is an isolated mountain that rises abruptly from the plain above the village of Shahri-Balol. It does not rise very high by comparison with the glistening sierras of the Hindu Kush and the Himalayas, which are visible from the summit of Takht-i-Bhai in clear weather. Measured from plain level, the altitude of Takht-i-Bhai may be not more than about 1,000 feet. But its precipitous flanks and razor-sharp ridges make it a true mountain in miniature, and its steep shoulders carry the massive remains of a Buddhist monastery. Here the monks attained the goal of their austere spiritual exercises. They won their way out of this world of appetite and recurrence into the serenity of the timeless state, and this serene timelessness pervades their empty courts and cells. Down below, the plain is still fast bound in the grip of karma. Down there, crops and cultures have never ceased to change. Shahri-Balol is an archaeologist's happy hunting ground. It stands on the site of a city of the Gandharan age. Climb the peak of the mountain from the monastery and look over the top, and you will see below you a post-war sugarcane crushing mill. On the plain, the wheel of life is turning at an accelerating pace. But up there, on the mountain, all is still. A tell like Jericho, a detailed analysis of Arnold J. Toynbee's essay. The Land as Historical Text. The opening gambit, Alice in Jericho Toynbee, begins with a striking comparative gesture. I have not yet seen a town like Alice. Perhaps the Alice is unique, but today I have seen a tell like Jericho. This opening establishes a pattern of comparison that will structure the entire essay. Alice Springs, the Alice of Australia, represents something singular and incomparable. But the mound at Charsadda evokes a connection across vast geographical and historical distances to the biblical city of Jericho in Palestine. This is quintessential Toynbee, the historian's mind constantly moving between places, times, and civilizations, seeking patterns and connections. The tell, archaeological mound, at Charsadda becomes a point of entry into deep historical time, a physical manifestation of human continuity and change. The visual canvas, Gandhara as staged Toynbee's description of the landscape, is remarkably precise and evocative. He stands on the summit of the greater of the two great mounds at Charsadda, the ancient capital of Gandhara. The panoramic view he describes is vast, more than 40 by 50 miles, enclosed by three mountain ranges, the gigantic Fives Court, with the Indus River marking the open end. This geographical setting is not merely background, but becomes the stage upon which the drama of civilization has unfolded. The mountains are walls. The plain is the playing field. The metaphor of the Fives Court, a game similar to squash, suggests that human civilization has been played out within this natural amphitheatre, with the mountains as immutable boundaries and the rivers as the life-giving forces that make human settlement possible. The river system, anatomy of a civilization. Toynbee's description of the rivers, the Kabul, Swat, and their numerous channels, reveals his deep appreciation for the material basis of civilization. He observes the rivers bleeding into irrigation canals, compares them to North European streams, and marvels at their volume. The river that emerges from the mountains at Abazai is likened to a shell shooting from the cannon's mouth, a military metaphor that suggests both power and violence. This section serves a crucial rhetorical purpose. Toynbee is establishing the fertility and wealth of the Gandharan plain. The agricultural abundance, wheat, rice, sugarcane, apricots, oranges, plums, pears, explains why this region has been continuously inhabited for millennia. The land itself is the foundation of history. Time measured in mud and debris. The tell as historical document. The mound at Charsadda becomes Toynbee's primary evidence for his historical argument. He describes it as built up out of layers of the debris of sun-dried brick buildings, rising a few feet more each time that dust has returned to dust. This is a profoundly materialist conception of history. Civilization leaves physical traces that accumulate over time. Toynbee compares the height of the Charsadda Mound to that of Jericho, but makes a crucial distinction. At Jericho, the same height must represent twice or 3 times that length of time, because Jericho's fields were irrigated by a single spring, while Charsadda was fed by this maid of rivers fertilizing the great green plain. This comparison reveals Toynbee's ecological approach to civilization. The natural environment determines the pace and pattern of human development. The mound at Charsadda, Toynbee estimates, represents a continuous history of human occupation extending over a span of perhaps 3,000 years. This is a modest estimate by archaeological standards. Modern research would date the earliest occupation of the Charsadda region to much earlier. But Toynbee's point is more philosophical than technical. Human civilization is a layered phenomenon, with each generation building upon the ruins of its predecessors. The rupture of history. Toynbee notes that the mound ceased to grow some 1,500 years ago, probably because it was sacked by the Huns in the 5th or 6th century of the Christian era. This observation introduces a darker theme into the essay, the fragility of civilization and the reality of historical rupture. The Huns, like so many invaders before and after, brought an end to a continuous tradition of urban life. Yet Toynbee immediately complicates this narrative by noting that the later deposits of civilization that are missing at Charsadda are present in the fort of Shabkadar. History, he suggests, does not end but merely moves to new locations. Shabkadar's fort has layers that are Victorian British on top and early 19th century Sikh below, suggesting the possibility of yet deeper layers beneath. This archaeological metaphor becomes a way of understanding the succession of empires and peoples in the region. Each layer represents a civilization that built upon and sometimes destroyed what came before. The British, the Sikhs, the Mughals, the Ghaznavids, the Kushans, the Greeks, each has left its mark on the landscape of Gandhara. The transience of human achievement. The garrison at Shabkadar. Toynbee's visit to the fort at Shabkadar, now garrisoned by the Pakistan Army's frontier force, prompts a meditation on imperial transience. The British have come and gone, the Sikhs have come and gone, and their monuments testify to the transitoriness of human efforts and achievements. This is a characteristic Toynbeean theme. the rise and fall of civilizations, the impermanence of political power. The fort, once a symbol of military might, is now just another layer in the archaeological record. The Pakistan Army's presence, Toynbee implies, will be equally transient in the vast span of history. This is not a pessimistic observation, but a realistic one. All empires eventually decline, all civilizations eventually fall. The Wheel of Karma Toynbee describes the plain below as still fast bound in the grip of karma, where crops and cultures have never ceased to change. The Hindu and Buddhist concept of karma, the cycle of action and consequence, birth and rebirth, becomes a metaphor for historical process. The plain is caught in a ceaseless cycle of growth, decay, and renewal. The sugar-cane crushing mill below the mountain is a symbol of this cycle, the wheel of life turning at an accelerating pace. Toynbee, writing in the mid-20th century, was acutely aware of the accelerating pace of technological and social change. The post-war world was transforming faster than ever before, and Toynbee saw this as both an intensification of the historical process and a potential threat to human continuity. The Monastery and the Timeless, Takht-i-Bhai, Mountain of the Throne. The essay's most powerful section describes Takht-i-Bhai, Throne of the Throne. The Buddhist monastery perched on an isolated mountain above the village of Shari-Balol. Toynbee's description is almost mystical. The mountain rises abruptly from the plain. Its precipitous flanks and razor-sharp ridges make it a true mountain in miniature. The contrast between the mountain and the plain is both physical and spiritual. The plain represents the world of change, desire, and suffering, the wheel of karma. The mountain represents the possibility of transcendence, the Buddhist ideal of liberation from the cycle of rebirth. The Buddhist achievement Toynbee describes how the monks attained the goal of their austere spiritual exercises and won their way out of this world of appetite and recurrence into the serenity of the timeless state. This serene timelessness now pervades their empty courts and cells. This is perhaps the most profound moment in the essay. While empires and armies have come and gone, while the plain has been continuously transformed by agriculture and politics, the Buddhist monastery on Takht-i-Bhai has achieved something more permanent, a timeless state that transcends historical change. The monastic community may have disappeared, but its spiritual achievement endures. The view from the top Toynbee's final observation is both simple and profound. But up there, on the mountain, all is still. The contrast with the plain below could not be more complete. Down below, the wheel of life is turning at an accelerating pace. Up above, there is only stillness, a stillness that is not mere absence of activity, but a positive quality, a state of spiritual attainment. This is not a retreat from history, but a transcendence of it. Toynbee, the historian of civilizations, acknowledges that there are values and achievements that lie beyond historical change. The Buddhist monks of Gandhara did not simply survive history, they escaped it entirely, achieving a state that is not subject to rise and fall, growth and decay. Part 5. Toynbee's philosophical framework, the cyclical view of history. A tell like Jericho exemplifies Toynbee's cyclical view of history. Civilizations rise, flourish, decline, and fall. This pattern is visible in the archaeological layers of Charsadda, the successive occupants of Shabkadar's fort, and the general rhythm of Gandharan history. The tell is a physical monument to this cyclical process, each layer representing a phase in the rise and fall of urban civilization. The ecological dimension. Toynbee was one of the first major historians to emphasize the ecological basis of civilization. The fertility of the Gandharan plain, the irrigation system that transformed the rivers into agricultural wealth, the natural boundaries provided by mountain ranges, All these factors shape the historical development of the region. History is not merely the story of human agency, but of human interaction with the environment. The spiritual dimension. Yet Toynbee was not a materialist. The essay's final section on the Buddhist monastery at Takht-i-Bhai introduces a spiritual dimension that transcends mere historical analysis. The monk's achievement is timeless and serene, existing outside the cycle of rise and fall that characterizes the plane below. This suggests that Toynbee saw religion as offering an escape from the tragic pattern of historical change. The comparative method. The essay's opening comparison, a tell like Jericho, exemplifies Toynbee's comparative method. By comparing the mound at Charsadda to the mound at Jericho, he invites readers to see Gandharan civilization in relation to other civilizations, to recognize patterns that recur across time and space. This is the method that would culminate in a study of history, with its ambitious comparison of 21 civilizations. The critique of modernity. Toynbee's observation that the wheel of life is turning at an accelerating pace suggests a critical attitude toward modernity. The post-war world, with its sugarcane crushing mills and rapid technological change, seems to Toynbee to be spinning out of control. The stillness of the mountain offers an implicit critique of the restlessness of modern civilization. Historical context. Gandhara in history. Toynbee's essay needs to be understood in the context of Gandhara's history. The region was a crucial crossroads of civilizations, a meeting point of Indian, Persian, Greek, and Central Asian cultures. It was the heartland of the Kushan Empire, a major centre of Buddhist art and philosophy, and a battleground for successive empires and invaders. The Greek influence on Gandharan art, the famous Greco-Buddhist sculpture, represents one of the most remarkable cultural syntheses in history. Toynbee does not mention this directly, but his description of the region's cultural complexity implies it. The very name Charsadda is a Persianized form of the Sanskrit Chandrasthala, suggesting the layers of cultural influence. The contemporary moment. Toynbee was writing in the mid-20th century, a period of decolonization and the emergence of new nation-states in South Asia. Pakistan, mentioned in the essay as the garrison power at Shabkadar, had been created only a few years before. Toynbee's reflections on the transience of British and Sikh rule implicitly acknowledge this new political reality. The essay also reflects Toynbee's broader concerns about the future of civilization. Writing in the shadow of World War II and the atomic bomb, he was acutely aware of the fragility of human achievement. The Buddhist monastery at Takht-i-Bhai offered a model of spiritual transcendence that Toynbee found deeply appealing. Literary and rhetorical analysis, style and tone. Toynbee's prose is clear, elegant and meditative. He moves seamlessly between precise geographical description, historical reflection, and philosophical meditation. His tone is authoritative but not dogmatic, reflective but not sentimental. He writes as a man who has seen many civilizations and learned to appreciate both their achievements and their limitations. Metaphor and comparison. The essay is structured around a series of comparisons: Alice Springs and Charsadda, Charsadda and Jericho, the plain and the mountain, the wheel of karma and the stillness of the monastery. These comparisons create a rich texture of meaning, inviting readers to see connections they might otherwise miss. The journey structure. The essay follows the physical journey of the author, from Charsadda to Shabkadar to Takht-i-Bhai. This journey structure gives the essay a narrative momentum, while also serving as a framework for the author's reflections. Each stop on the journey prompts a different kind of reflection. On history at Charsadda, on imperial transience at Shabkadar, on spiritual transcendence at Takht-i-Bhai. The use of detail. Toynbee's eye for detail is remarkable. He notes the line of poplars and the row of bluffs that mark the course of the rivers. He observes the apricots alternating with oranges, plums and pears in the orchards. He describes the bullock cart's placid pace of the rivers. These details make the landscape vivid and concrete, anchoring the abstract historical reflections in physical reality. The significance of the essay. The classic East and West anthology is no longer part of the BA curriculum in Pakistan, as the country has traded the traditional BA and MA programs for a dubious BS English degree. However, for early students of the NWFP, now Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, this essay collection offered not only a portrait of their region, but also a model for thinking historically about it. The landscape of Gandhara is more than a physical environment. It is a historical palimpsest, layered with the remnants of countless civilizations. To understand the present, one must understand the past, and to understand the past, one must learn to read the landscape. The anthology brought together essays from both Eastern and Western perspectives, with British authors in particular offering reflections on the people and terrain of KP, observations that, for better or worse, shaped the colonial and post-colonial imagination of the region. For the historian, Toynbee's essay represents a distinctive approach to history, one that combines geography, archaeology, philosophy, and personal observation into a seamless whole. It is history as meditation, history as reflection, history as a way of understanding not just the past, but the human condition itself. For the philosopher, the essay raises profound questions about the nature of historical time, the meaning of human achievement, and the possibility of transcendence. Toynbee's Buddhist monastery offers a counterpoint to the cyclical tragedy of history, suggesting that some human achievements exist outside historical time altogether. For the citizen of the world, a tell like Jericho is finally a meditation on place and identity. Toynbee, a British historian, writes about a region of Pakistan with deep appreciation and understanding. He sees the connections between this region and others, the Mediterranean, Northern Europe, the Middle East. He reminds us that human history is a shared history, a common inheritance that transcends national boundaries. Conclusion: the enduring relevance of Toynbee's vision. Arnold J. Toynbee's A Tell Like Jericho remains a remarkable achievement, an essay that combines historical scholarship, philosophical reflection, and personal observation into a seamless whole. Its vision of Gandhara as a layered landscape of civilizations, its meditation on the transience of empires and the permanence of spiritual achievement, and its evocation of the timeless stillness of Takht-i-Bhai continue to resonate. The essay invites readers to see their own landscape with new eyes, to recognize the layers of history beneath the surface of the present, and to appreciate both the achievements and the limitations of human civilization. It offers no easy answers, but suggests a way of thinking about history that is both intellectually rigorous and spiritually open. In the end, Toynbee's vision is profoundly humanistic. He believes in human achievement while acknowledging its fragility. He respects the great civilizations of the past, while recognizing that all civilizations eventually decline. He finds hope in the spiritual transcendence of the Buddhist monks, while never forgetting the suffering and struggle that mark human history. This is a vision that speaks not only to BA students in Pakistan, but to all who seek to understand the human condition in all its complexity.